Okay. Ready.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm gonna go ahead and
You-
get you.
Just another reason you've earned your vacation.
I'm gonna get another hand.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. We are so thrilled to have you to hear an incredible speaker and businesswoman with us tonight. I'm going to let Amani Coney introduce her. So I just want to kick off with a couple notes. First of all, this evening is really possible because of a number of people that are not myself. I'm Meredith Meyer-Grelly. I teach entrepreneurship and innovation here at Tepper. But Colleen, would you mind standing up for a moment? Colleen McMullen is responsible for introducing us to our speaker tonight. So thank you for that, Colleen. Yeah. Colleen's doing amazing work here at Tepper. And I'm so thankful for the connections you've made for us. I'd also like to thank the Swartz Center for Entrepreneurship team, Dave Mawhinney, who is here somewhere. Dave's over there. If you don't know Dave and you're planning to start an enterprise, you need to know Dave. Likewise, Sonia and Alex in the back there, and Allison, who could not be here tonight, but thank you guys all very much for all of your work. We have a really great spread for you to enjoy outside. Immediately after the talk, you're welcome to hang out and grab some bites. And we look forward to that. Now, I would love to introduce you to Amani Coney, a first-year MBA here at the Tepper School. She's a mechanical engineer, might ring familiar to some of you in the room. And of course, is now in the MBA program. She's a real estate entrepreneur in her own right, and is a James R. Swartz scholarship recipient, which is appropriate because the Swartz program is helping to fund this event as well. So we're very appreciative of James Swartz all together. All right. Thank you, Amani. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. How are you guys doing today? Awesome. Well, I'm here to introduce our lovely speaker, Miss Stephanie Hickman. So without further ado, I will be reading her short bio. After a career as a labor attorney, utility executive, and lobbyist, Stephanie Hickman left corporate America in 2006 to acquire the construction company her family started in 1967. Since the acquisition, she has led its transformation from a small residential construction company to an award-winning utility infrastructure contractor serving Fortune 500 corporations, top 100 general and infrastructure contractors, and major public entities. Hickman has combined her leadership skills with a team of seasoned operations professionals to position the company for continued exponential growth and success. Hickman's leadership acumen is illustrated by Trice's accomplishments, including becoming the first African-American women-owned construction firm awarded prime and multi-year contracts with companies such as Ameren, ComEd Exelon, Nicor Gas, People's Gas, and the Chicago Department of Transportation. The company was ranked on the Fortune Inner City 100 list of the fastest growing businesses for 3 consecutive years. Trice has earned numerous awards, including 2018 Women's Business Enterprise of the Year for Chicago Women's Business Development Center, 2017 Minority Construction Firm of the Year from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and the 2017 Urban Impact Award from the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City. Ms. Hickman holds a JD from the University of Mississippi and a business degree from Eastern New Mexico University. She also completed executive management programs at Dartmouth and the University of Pittsburgh. Hickman serves on the board of trustees of the Museum of Science and Industry and Glenwood Academy. She is on the boards of the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce and the Law Alumni Chapter of Ole Miss Alumni Association. She formerly served on the national boards of the American Association of Blacks in Energy and Women Construction Owners and Executives, and completed 2 terms as a mayoral appointee to the advisory board for Chicago's Department of Procurement Services. She is a member of the Economic Club of Chicago, the Chicago Network, and was recently named a 2022 Outstanding WBE CEO in Women's Enterprise Magazine, and 2021 Crain's Chicago Business Notable Women in Construction and Design. Hickman, a sought-after speaker, so we're lucky we have her here this evening, was selected in 2019 as a Chicago United Business Leader of Color, is a 2006 Fellow of Leadership, Greater Chicago, and a life member of beloved sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She enjoys mentoring minority business in the early stages of their development. She believes it's an ongoing responsibility to pay it forward. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Stephanie Hickman.
Well, that was a mouthful. So you might wonder, when do I have time to actually work and run Trice construction? And I tell you, that's something I'm considering. Am I overextended? So it's very easy to do that, as I will share with the entrepreneurs in the world, in the room. Imani, thank you so much for that introduction. And my thanks to Professor Grelly for inviting me back to Tepper. I was here about 15 months ago when I spoke to the family business class, and we had a great day. Congratulations on the launch of this speaker series. I think it's a great thing to be able to bring people in, and we thank Swords Entrepreneurship Center for supporting this inaugural season, and I'm honored to be part of it. Family business is a critical and impactful piece of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I again applaud Tepper for recognizing this vital part of our economy. And I'm excited and pleased to be back in Pittsburgh. I lived here 1995 to 1999. I came here and went to work for Duquesne Light Company. But what's most exciting for me today is to be in a room with people who share the experience of a connection to a family business. So I'm going to ask here for a show of hands. How many folks here are in or family owns a business? You've been somehow related? Show of hands. I know we got some in the room. Great, I'm among friends. I've been privileged to have been invited to talk a bit about my journey. Taking over my family business has been a transformational experience for the business and for me. So I'd like to spend the time I have this evening to tell you about my journey in building a business. I think the experiences are universal and may be instructive to those of you who are already on the journey or those of you who are contemplating the journey. So a little bit about my background and how I came to run and lead Trice Construction Company. I'm 4th generation of a family that's been involved in construction since the late 1800s. If I have a tough day, I always remind myself of how difficult it must have been for those in my family who came before me. So my family on both sides are from Mississippi. My great-grandfather Trice provided labor and equipment for the construction of the first paved roads in North Mississippi. So early 1900s, equipment was a mule, and the labor was my great-uncle Albert. My great-grandfather and his father were landowners in that period of time in the late 1800s, which was an almost unheard of accomplishment for Black people at that time. Later, his son, my grandfather, worked at a construction supply company. So he was on construction job sites almost every day. And his entrepreneurial spark was he had a side hustle. And he was the Uber of his time in his small rural community. And he would transport people in from kind of the rural area into town for their jobs. And he'd take them back home 5 days a week, and actually 6 days a week he did that. On the other side of my family, on the Hickman side, my great-grandfather Hickman dug the water wells for his central Mississippi community. Sometimes he used a mule to turn that auger, and sometimes he used his grandsons, and my dad included. So his son, my grandfather, was a carpenter, built his own home from the ground up. Now, my parents were part of the Great Migration North in the late 1950s. And when they arrived, along with other members of their family to Chicago, they worked in construction. And they kind of settled into concrete construction. So every day, I think about how hard my family worked. And I have vivid memories of my father coming home at the end of a long work day, and he'd have those concrete spatters on his boots and on his pants. And I really treasure the scuffs I have on my own boots when I go out to a job site, because it really reminds me of him. So fast forward a bit from the late 50s, my dad and uncles decided to start their own construction business. That was in 1967, and that was the beginning of Trice Construction. So I want you to pause for a minute and think back to 1967, what you've read in the history books as I look around the room. Can you imagine the audacity of 4 Black men, all under the age of 30, who believed that they could start a company that would care for their young families in that time frame? I marvel at that they felt comfortable, but over 40-year period, they built a business that housed, fed, clothed, educated 10 households, and were able to see that business grow into a respectable concrete construction company with a really great reputation. I pursued a different career path. Imani shared some of that with you, because after all, nobody expected a girl would go into construction, unheard of. But after undergrad, I spent 5 years working in human resources and manufacturing, honing my skills in labor relations and negotiations. And in my first position, I realized that I thought all the attorneys were having all the fun. I realized I wanted to be on the telling end as opposed to be on the asking end of that relationship between labor relations and the attorneys. So I went to law school and worked for a number of years as an attorney with the National Labor Relations Board. I investigated unfair labor practice charges. I tried cases before administrative law judges. I left the NLRB when I moved to Pittsburgh. It was a family relocation, and I was unable to get a transfer to the local regional office. So I showed up in Pittsburgh, put on my suit, had a stack of resumes, and I pounded the pavement and found my way into a meeting of the local African-American Bar Association. From that meeting, that led to my employment at Duquesne Light. The meeting led to several interviews and ultimately the creation of a new position there. I worked there alongside both in-house and outside counsel. And after a period of time, I was recruited back to Chicago by the local utility company there, ComEd. I turned them down twice, offers of positions. Dr. Daria Crawley there from assistant dean at Robert Morris University. She and I met when I first came to Pittsburgh, so she remembers that. And so I took the interview and they offered a position. I said, no, I don't think this is the right one. Came back again, sweetened the pot a little bit and offered me the position again. And I said, no, not exactly what I'm looking for. And the third time they came back, I said, okay, Lord, I don't know what it is you have for me to do, but I will accept the position. So on the third time, I accepted the offer. And I started a position as the Director of Labor Relations, supporting the nuclear generation group. My internal client very quickly hired me into their organization, and again, in a newly created position. I managed labor and employment related negotiations and litigation, where I had ultimate strategy and settlement authority as a representative of the business. That move led to me becoming the vice president just a couple of years later of Exelon Enterprises, which was an unregulated collection of energy services businesses, including a number of construction companies. I went from there to Exelon Energy Delivery, which was the wires business, the energy delivery part, basically like Duquesne Light Company here in Pittsburgh. So I'm humming along in my career. And by 2005, my father and one of my uncles had passed away, and my surviving uncles were preparing to implement their exit strategy. Well, that exit strategy was cease operations. It pretty much amounted to them turning the lights off and closing the business. There was no succession plan, no strategy for the generational transfer of the business. They had already started turning down business and referring work to competing firms. And here I am having a really great career. I'm working for a Fortune 150 company, the third largest utility in the country, and I was rising through the ranks. Corporate career was going well, and I was pretty happy. But there was this little thing, a little voice inside that I think was pushing me to find another adventure, and that was really colliding with what was happening in the family business. So I was in a budget meeting, budget challenge meeting, and people were coming in and presenting. And I looked, there was a line item in the budget for concrete. And I looked at it closely, and I was like, I must be reading this number incorrectly. And I kind of leaned over to the person next to me and I said, what's that number say? And I looked at it and I remember thinking, boy, if I could just get 10% of that number, I'd really be doing great in a business. And it was literally that day, light bulb went off over my head, pun intended. And that was the day I started to plan my exit. So, due diligence on a family business. They've been around for 40 years, and where the business development person had passed away, the person who basically handled all the back office operations had passed away, and the two survivors were the operations guys. So I had to do a lot of digging. There was a lot of shoe boxes and stacks of paper and trying to figure out what was going on. So that was my due diligence. Then I started thinking about, well, what's really going on in the concrete construction industry? My family poured sidewalks and garage slabs, for the garage behind your house. And they had done it one way for a long time. So what was really going on in the concrete construction industry? And because I've been sitting at the tables and involved in organizations with regard to the utility industry, I knew what the forecast was in terms of what that business was going to look like. So I spent some time leveraging my network to talk to people to say, I'm thinking about this. Would your utility do business with a company like Trice? My vision of what the next phase of Trice would look like. So after engaging in those activities, I decided to take the leap. And I left my really nice, comfortable corporate position and completed an asset acquisition of the family business from my uncles. And boy, did I get the adventure that I was looking for. I purchased a business that had an excellent reputation, but no clients, no revenue, no staff, no backlog, no pipeline. So really, what I got, I bought a startup. But I had a 40-year head start. And so that was very helpful because I spent the first year rounding up some of those previous clients just to say that we were an ongoing entity. 2006, there had been zero revenue in the business. In 2007, we did a whopping $35,000 in revenue, some of which I encouraged my friends, don't you need a new patio in your backyard? And I spent the time in business development, and In 2008, we did 2 million in revenue, and we've been going up since then. So sometimes I wondered what I got myself into, but I've never doubted my choice to pick up and continue my family's legacy. So today, 16 years later, I'm proud to say that Trice is a totally different business. So I won't repeat what Imani shared with you about us being an award-winning company recognized by both clients and peers and by third-party organizations. But we're now a middle market, self-performing utility infrastructure and concrete contractor. Challenge you to say that fast. But we're a contractor of choice in our industry and among our clients. We employed about 125 individuals last year. We're 80% diverse in that workforce. Many of our employees were formerly underemployed. Some were returning citizens. And we really target that kind of workforce for our organization because we think it is important and that is part of our contribution in closing that 10-to-1 wealth gap that persists for African Americans. So what do we do now? Where's Ian? Let's see if I get this right. So one thing I wanted to share, because it's a question we would get asked very often in the early parts of the business. It's like, do you own your own equipment? And I'd ask, well, how do we get the work done if we don't own our own equipment? So we had in 2018, I think it was 17 or 18, we needed to replenish our fleet, replace things that we were renting as we grew. And so I had a photo shoot for my equipment. Who does that? But we did. This was all the new equipment. It was looking good. It was just the day before we sent it all out in the field. I'd had a chance to drive the big truck that's sitting back there. And that's the baseline. We're in a capital intensive business. We've got to have a lot of big equipment trucks, excavators, et cetera, to do our work. So we talked about our clients, the utilities, the general contractors, the prime multi-year agreements that we have. And that's really a big deal in our industry that you have prime contracts. Often companies like Trice work as tier 2, as subcontractors to other large prime contractors. And we've been able to position the business that we're competing. We're punching way above our weight class with some of the companies that we compete with that are multi-billion-dollar firms. And we're not there yet. First African-American owned firm to have a contract with the Chicago Department of Transportation. That was a really big deal. And let's see if we get this. So let me tell you a little bit about what the big deal is because of the kind of work that we do. We do work in electrical manholes. This is a live electrical manhole. You can see the conduit, then the wires coming through there just over that gentleman's head. And so we've spent the last, really since 2016, building new manholes in downtown St. Louis. Hundreds of them. Some big, some small, but that's an example of that work. We also do work in electrical substations. We build structures, so we do the civil work, any of the concrete work, excavation, foundations, walls inside those structures. Large slabs, that big giant transformers that get shipped in from Europe, where they get placed on the slabs that we pour. This was our biggest single concrete pour in the history of the company. We poured 2,300 cubic yards of concrete. So if you think about the trucks, the ready-mix trucks that you see going around, they hold 9 yards each. We had the total capacity of 1 yard manufacturing facility that day to deliver it. It was a long, cold day. Another picture from that particular day and that project. And this is one of our carpenters when we were building a 30-foot tall wall that goes in between these large transformers to protect them in the event that one of them has a failure that might result in a fire. It can protect the others that are there. So we also do conduit packages, duct packages. So you've seen this in here in Pittsburgh and in your own communities, that big long trench that's going down the middle of the street, wrecking traffic for the day. And somebody has to do that work, and we're fortunate enough to do that. So this is, you probably can barely make out, but that says St. Louis Cardinals right there. And so this was one of our early conduit projects, and would you believe we got it running right in front of the St. Louis Cardinals Stadium, and where we were competing with opening day, and we got it done. We really didn't think we were going to get this project, but it was a great demonstration. You've probably seen this with the plates going down the middle of the street to cover up those open excavations. And then we do something really simple. That very first contract I mentioned that we had with the gas company in Chicago was we would come behind their repair crews. If they were doing some work, then we just come back and restore the sidewalks and the holes in the pavement that they left. And it was a really good fit, multiple locations during the day, very much something that was an easy transition from what the family had done for 40 years, and to be able to apply that into a new environment. And I referenced St. Louis. In 2016, we expanded our footprint, our geographic presence, and we did our first jobs in St. Louis. And the good news about it, we didn't show up and plant our flag and say, okay, we're here. Let's see about doing some business. We very strategically partnered with another organization, much bigger, who kind of took us under their wing. And it made it very comfortable for the client. It was an easy onboarding for us, but we went in with a very intentional plan that within 2 years, we would move from being tier 2 or subcontractor to becoming a tier 1 contractor for the utility company there, Ameren. And that's exactly what's happened. We've slowly built the number of crews. We've got a new facility there. We've got workforce project management there to engage with the people, all while we maintain our Chicago headquarters. And this worked out really as a great model for us, because it was a larger company that wasn't concerned or worried that we would become too competitive and take business away from them. But right now, we go head to head. We compete with them for work. And the previous owner says that all she did was enlarge the pie. And it's very important to note that there was another woman-owned company who was willing, I call her very courageous, that she was willing to extend an opportunity to a competitor that allowed us to grow. So we've also worked on some exciting projects that have transformed communities, like the Whole Foods development in Chicago, Inglewood community. If you listen to the news, you hear about Inglewood all the time. It's plagued with and challenged with some violence. It was a food desert. And we were part of the team that built the Whole Foods and the development around it. Pullman Park, the first national park in the city of Chicago. We did all of the sidewalks around that structure, but we did not get invited to the ribbon cutting when President Obama came. Like, it's on our sidewalks. We were part of a design and construction team, the first 100% African-American design and construction team to build a state-of-the-art fire station in Chicago. Love doing work with the city, but we're still waiting to get paid for that one. Okay, waiting to get the rest of our money. So what's really exciting for us is that last year, We started work as a member of a joint venture executing the building concrete for the Obama Presidential Center. We finished our first phase of work and will return later this year. There was a point when they were talking about the project and whether it was coming to Chicago, and when Chicago got selected, I was like, if we could just do 1 square of concrete on this project, I feel real good. That would be my legacy to the company. But later this year, we look forward to working in this final phase of the project, which will include creating the pathways that will welcome and guide visitors from around the world as they explore the beautiful grounds at the Obama Presidential Center. So exceeded my expectations, and we're really proud to be part of this exciting project. Now, as we look to the future, we're continuing to scale the business organically. I've taken a stab at a couple of acquisitions. Neither one of them got across the finish line. One of them still kind of hanging by a thread. We're talking. One was a hard no because there was no way we were going to close the gulf on price. But there was also a company that had worked all the way through their backlog. And so I couldn't rationalize their asking price against what the prospects were in the business. So ultimately, the owner just closed the business. And so we bought some of their equipment and we hired all their employees. So I think we still completed, I don't know what kind of acquisition that was, but it was a cashless, no cost acquisition. And we're considering something I never would have thought of 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I certainly wouldn't have been in favor of it. I have an advisor who says, never, ever, ever, never give up equity. And so now I'm thinking about it. You know, how do we get through our next phase of growth? How do we access the capital that will enable that? So this is something that's now on my radar that we're considering. So I know it sounds pretty simple. I can, in 15 minutes, say, hey, this is point A and how we got here to point B. And it just sounds simple and straightforward. But believe me, it's never been easy. It's been hard work, but it's really been hard work for me. I remember a time when I thought taking the bar exam would be just the absolute hardest professional task I would ever encounter. I was wrong. Starting and running a business is infinitely harder. Nothing quite prepares you for the intensity of running your own show. So I have a few guideposts that I've identified and developed over the years that I'd like to share. First, make sure you love the work. It will take a lot longer than you think to move things forward. If I've learned anything in this journey, it's patience. I've never been a patient person. I want it now, let's go on, what are we waiting for? But this has had me to be a lot more patient, a lot more deliberate. So when it's taken the kind of time that it sometimes takes, it better be something that brings you some amount of joy. I'm not an engineer or a trades person, but I love going to a job site. And if I get on that job site, it's always hard to tear myself away for it because, I'm going like, can I get some concrete on my boots? And, I'm down in there, I'm pointing and what are we doing? And hey, the slump on that concrete looks a little thick for this, for what we're doing here today. So I'm asking a lot of questions. Sometimes I'm getting in the way. And once I was on a job site and I got escorted off by my safety director because I got pretty animated on something that wasn't going well. And I'd come out of the trailer and forgot to put my hard hat on. And he came up and he said, Miss Stephanie, you about ready to go home? And I looked around and I was frustrated. I was like, yeah, I'm leaving. Well, the next day when I got ready to go back to the job site, I couldn't find my hard hat. And then I realized that I was violating safety rules on the job site. And he was just kind enough to not say that, but to get me out of the way. He didn't write me up, he should have. But that's me getting on a job site. So love what you do. Second guidepost, and this is the one that really challenged me quite a bit with that patience thing, is understanding that the sales cycle can be incredibly long. I had no idea. So for us in my industry, utility infrastructure, it's about an 18 to 24 month sales cycle. People gotta know who you are, they wanna see your past performance, and it just takes a while for them to get comfortable with the idea of bringing on a new supplier. So tomorrow I'm gonna meet with the folks over at Duquesne Light. I don't expect anything to come out of that until 2024 at the earliest, maybe 2025, but we gotta start somewhere. I've really identified, and I'm not sure this is original thought, but I think it takes 8 to 10 contacts before you can get to an initial contract with the new customer. Give you an example. We started doing subcontract work for ComEd, my last employer, and right away after I left. But it took 6 years before we got our first prime contract with people who knew me, who knew the company, who I'd worked alongside. But there was a reason why. We didn't have the portfolio. We didn't have the past performance. We didn't have that ability to demonstrate that we could actually perform the work we were pursuing. And we needed to get that experience first. And energy and utility companies are very, very risk averse, and for good reason. But good rule of thumb, 8 to 10 contacts to get to the first contract. Third guidepost, hire a good team and learn to trust and empower them. Every minute you're bogged down by administrative tasks is a minute you're not out there building relationships and selling. What's that? ABS, always be selling. And you got to get out there and do it. And I think entrepreneurs tend to be type A personalities, control freaks. But we should let go of those tedious tasks as early as we can. Now, granted, in a small organization, as you're starting out, you're going to wear many, many hats. I could talk to a client by day, and I might have been cleaning the bathroom in the afternoon and driving some material out to a job site. But as we've grown, I've fired myself from many different positions at Trice Construction Company. And we now have an experienced, diverse executive team with deep utility construction experience, with construction and engineering, just construction in general. Excuse me. So my leadership team now consists of a COO, 20 plus years in utility infrastructure contracting, working primarily on natural gas transmission, but having come up from the crew level and who ran $160 million P&L operation inside his former employer. He joined us about 18 months ago. Hired right in the middle of the pandemic, we hired our first CFO. And that gentleman came to us with experience in the industry, an engineering company where we'd had same clients. And he incidentally had been involved in 3 PE turns in his firm. So he really brought an experience and a discipline that has really been impactful for our business. And I don't hoard all the customer contacts. I brought on a director of business development to also work alongside. And we all operate at different levels within organizations. I tell my team, everybody is in sales at the company, but we work together to develop and execute the overall strategy. And our vice president of operations is 3G in the business, third generation. So my son has worked in the business for about the past 12 years, and he's taken over another entity that we own that's driving some business in from the utility market as well. In the process of building the team, There've been some wins, there've been some things that didn't go so well, and I've learned two important lessons. And you've probably heard these. Character is more important than talent, and culture trumps strategy. And that holds true. An extended part of the team are service providers like the bank, legal counsel, accounting firms, risk management and insurance, for us bonding. These are essential stakeholders in your business that must be carefully and thoughtfully curated. They've got to work together with each other. They've got to work together with your team, and they have to be aligned with the mission. And so we've spent a lot of time getting that right. And I think we've put together a really top-notch team of service providers. Of note, our corporate counsel and our risk management firm are both led by African-American women. Made a critical decision, I think it was in 2011, to create a board of advisors for the company. And I was looking at it, how can I fill in the blanks in my own experience to allow the company to move and grow faster? You know, be careful what you ask for. I have a board now of accomplished experts with innovative advice and dynamic perspectives. They don't always agree with each other either. That group, one was my former boss when I worked for the Exelon Enterprises, the unregulated business. This is a guy, West Point, worked in large consulting firm, bought and sold businesses across multiple industries, but knows new utilities. So it's interesting. So I guess I'm still working for him. He's on the board of advisors. One of the first people I met, my longtime mentor, is third generation in his family's engineering and construction company. And like me, he's a refugee from the legal practice, and he and I bonded very easily and very quickly. I remember him telling me at the first meeting we had, he said, "I admire your moxie. I want to help you grow your company." I think what he was saying, you don't know what you're getting into, and you need somebody who's going to help you. And he's been there with us really since the second year of the business, and always pushing us to be on the cutting edge and understanding the emerging trends in the industry. The third person is gentleman who's focused around sales optimization. So he's driving that strategy. What are you going to do? If you don't grow, you're going to die. You know, how do you move that forward? So we get pushed in lots of different directions in the business. We meet quarterly, and I treat it like a board of directors meeting with presentations, and we go in for that. And it's like Shark Tank. Every time we go into that meeting, I'm in the meetings and I think my eyebrows go up and they stay there during the course of the meeting, but I've learned so much. I've got one who only wants to talk about the income statement. He's gonna flip over to that income statement. He's going right to net operating income. He don't want to talk about the rest of it. He looks at that number. I've got another one, the balance sheet. Well, let's look at the ratios. How's the leverage doing? What's DSO? What's your DPO? And those were things I had to learn somewhat on the fly. But he asked a question at the first Board of Advisors meeting I convened. And he's sitting there, and this is my old boss. He goes, "So what's the economic model of the business?" And I was like, "Make money?" And he said, "No, we're really trying to understand how does the model work, what?" And I said, "Can we meet offline?" And so had lunch with him a couple of weeks later, and I said, "I'm not sure I understand your question. We're here, profit, loss, profit more than loss." And about a year later, I was able to answer that question for him. So this Board of Advisors has really driven our performance, whether we're focusing on revenue, we're focusing on profit, we're focusing on the balance sheet and our equity in the business. engaging them has sharpened my business acumen. When you have to, even as a 100% owner of your business, have that kind of accountability, it can't do anything but make you better. And I think this is one of the smartest moves I've made. So fourth guidepost, no business operates as an island. And if the pandemic didn't teach us anything else, it taught us that global issues can have very, very local implications, just like legislative and policy and regulatory shifts, economic and labor market trends, transformations in technology. I think we saw all of that during the pandemic. Right now, for us, it's an exciting time of transition in the energy industry, and that's driving great opportunity for us. So we've made the strategic shift away from all of these wonderful projects that we're wrapping up into focusing strictly on our utility business. Decarbonization, beneficial electrification, renewables, undergrounding, taking wires that are above ground, putting them underground. There are trillions of dollars of spend over the next 10 years, and we want to be part of that. And finally, it's all about relationships. How do you keep in touch with your network? Do you stay in touch with key contacts? How do you develop new relationships? I've gone to events just because I knew there was somebody on the board of an organization that I wanted to meet with. I couldn't get a meeting with them at their office. Great executive assistants are really strong gatekeepers. And if you're not sanctioned, you're not going to get in there. But if you're having a glass of wine and you bump into them at a reception on purpose, that's a different thing. You want to know what issues are they wrestling with? Just how do you get in front of them? And fourth or fifth meeting, 8 to 10 contacts before you can even start talking about working together. Access to capital, that too is about relationships, but that's a whole nother speech. I can give it another time, but know that those are relationship driven as well. I've talked about my relationship here with Dr. Crawley. I know Colleen McMullen, and those are relationships that matter. And I think my new CMU Tepper relationships will be important as well, Professor Graley, and some of you in the room here. So I want to share in concluding that growing the business is not the end, it's a means to an end. The end goal is lifting up not only my family, but also my community. Our tagline is making pathways possible. And that has two meanings, directly, pathways, sidewalks, streets, but it's also a metaphor. The company built a legacy. My family built a legacy that provided jobs and opportunities, economic empowerment. We talk about those kind of paths. I look to extend that legacy by making it my personal mission to bring more women, more African-American women into the utility construction trades. When you have trillions of dollars of spend and decades to get it done, those are major, major careers. Somebody told me that when you change the life of a woman, you change a family. When you change a family, you change a community. And so we think this is a way for us to start that. And this really is part of my mission also, to get in front of groups and especially young women to talk to them about what they can do. And I know that I serve as a role model. My personal mission statement is demonstrating personal power and possibility, and folks need to see you. So trying to leave some time for questions, and I'll leave you finally with this observation. The most meaningful and probably the most surprising part of this journey is how it's made me feel connected to my family roots. I traced the seeds of this company, as I shared, back to the post-Reconstruction South. And I'm now following in the footsteps of my ancestors. And I'm conscious every day that I'm standing on their shoulders and doing projects that my great-grandfathers and even my dad and uncles never could have imagined. But I'd like to think what they would recognize today, that their values of self-reliance, commitment, and hard work live on in today's Trice Construction Company. I'm descended from people who accomplished things that were nearly impossible in their time. And that gets me out of bed every morning with the fire and passion in my heart. So I thank you for this opportunity to share a bit about my journey. And I think Professor Grelly and Ms. Coney here will give us an opportunity for some Q&A. So thank you. Leave that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have a bit of time for Q&A. Amani is gonna, if you have a question, please raise your hand. Amani is gonna get the mic to you.
From behind the podium here. It's on.
Hey, my name's Colin Welch. I'm a second-year MBA student, and thank you so much for being here with us today. It was a really great lecture. You mentioned a little bit about sustainability goals for your construction company, and I know that's a really big issue for a lot of construction companies, given that cement is a major emitter in the process for CO2. Can you talk a little bit about what Trice is doing to mitigate that? Are you switching to different materials, trying new processes, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are different mix designs that you can use that bring greener elements into it. Fly ash from the steel production process, different sources of cement materials. Now, we're finding shortages in a lot of that now, but that's been one of those things. How do we green up the work that we do? Yeah, great question. I appreciate that.
Right here. Questions. Well, thank you again for your time. My name is Trey Lowenthal. You mentioned kind of at the beginning how you went through the acquisition of your family's business. And I know that construction in and of itself is a very capital intensive business. And then you kind of touched on at the end of how, you know, some of that capital really comes from relationships. So just wondering if there was something you could comment on about how you kind of hedge that risk, or if you did, if you went all in, but how you really came about growing such a capital intensive business with zero backlog.
Yeah, that was a tough one. So one of the things I did early, I self-funded at the very beginning. My first line of credit was I put up the cash for, remember, this is 2008 and the capital markets were really closed down then. Even though we grew our business through that time frame, it was still a tough time to get capital. I went with a bank that was probably not the right fit for us very early on, and then moved to another organization that worked better. But the third time, we went out into the market and issued an RFP to banks. Somebody said, "You can do that?" You actually can. We put out, this was our request for financing, and we sent it to 10 banks. We got 2 that said no. We had 1 that said not now, and then the other 7 offered us terms. And so we then had an opportunity to pick, and that's why we were able to identify where we thought the right fit would be. So it's still tough on capital. We know that among, you know, for capital intensive firms, right? People are happy to lend you money against the asset itself. So, you know, I sign a lot of personal guarantees to be able to access the capital. We have an equipment line of credit that allows us to, you know, get equipment as we need it, term that out over time. And then we have a pretty good line of credit. You know, one of the other reasons we're looking to move away from some of the public work and some of the other private work with developers is that it drives up your DSO. It takes them so long to pay. And I just had a note from my CFO since I was here today. I guess we're getting a check from the city, and he says, "Wow, it's been great funding the city of Chicago for the last 2 years." Don't publish this where they can see them. So, but that remains an ongoing challenge. Hence the idea and the thought that we should consider investors, and that way we can, you know, further accelerate our growth opportunities. And strategic investors. I'd hate to spend no shade to the PE folks in the room, but I'd rather look at a strategic because folks that understand and know the business already. Right.
Hi, your story was very.
Okay.
decide not to, and I like it was so inspirational, like hearing you like step in, like go to a completely different career path, and like just holding all these hats. Like, when did you think like I need to hire a board, I need to expand, like thinking about like even selling equity? Like, how did you make these like decisions and all of that?
Usually, at least in my experience, those decisions have often come in moments of overwhelm, right? I'm only one person. I can only do so much. And somehow the plate remains full as much as I think I'm pushing things off. But it usually came to, okay, I have exceeded my personal capability. I don't have the competence to do this for a company this size. And as the company grew, so I knew I needed to get people who had different and better expertise than I had. I did not want the company to be limited by my abilities or my bandwidth. And so it was one of those, okay, if we're going to get this done, we need to bring some more people on. It was a big deal, hiring COO. Yes, it's a big deal bringing on the CFO. It's like, oh gosh, somebody's going to be in my money every day, right? And he just late last year wrestled payroll from me. And when I say wrestle, he was like, every week, you're going to show me how to do payroll. You're going to show me how to do payroll. I remember reading years ago that Oprah said she signs all of her own checks. And I said, well, if Oprah can do it, I can do it. So I still do that.
I think we are going to wrap it up at this point.
Can I take just one more question? She's had her hand up since the beginning.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if I'm disrupting, entrepreneurs, we don't follow the rules sometimes.
So I have two questions for you. I'm so sorry. My first question is, are you comfortable with sharing the lowest point for you in your business and how you overcame that, especially as a woman of color? My second question is, I'm working with UK Light Company now for my capstone project. And our challenge right now is to repurpose their coal ash and their coal ash sites. And I know that one of it is in concrete. I wanted to know if you have any B2B collaborations with other companies like UK Light, and how do you repurpose this to make concrete?
Yeah, I can't speak about coal ash. I do know that a lot of coal-fired generation plants are closing as companies are, as we're decarbonizing the industry. And a lot of them are putting renewables, whether they're putting in solar plants at their former generation sites. So I don't know exactly what's going on with coal ash outside of my expertise, but I will share with you a low point. That project where we had to 2,300 cubic yards, and I was so excited and still very proud of that, is the project we took our single biggest loss on. Right. So I say it's got to be worth something to talk about it now. It's like, it's a really big project. And we had gotten over our skis. It was a project that we were doing scopes of work we hadn't done before. We were acting as a general contractor, and we made some bad decisions in the process. And it really came back to bite us. And so that was a tough year. And we were facing an existential crisis that year. Owed people a lot of money. Work that down very slowly. We had some people that, they were coming at us, when are you going to pay us? When are you going to pay us? And I told everybody when. I engaged in a series of monthly phone calls with the people we owed money to and I told them I can't get on a payment plan, but I can commit to this backstop that it will all be done, and just constantly communicated with them on a routine basis. And I will tell you, every one of them would do business with us again because we built that communications piece, and we built trust with them because we did what we said we would do. But that was a tough time. I was worried. I said, maybe I better dust off the old resume. But it didn't get to that. And I'm not even sure I'm fit to be employed by anybody anymore after having been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years now. But thanks for that question, because it's not all, hey, it's wonderful. There are those tough days. You just don't know what you're going to do. And, having a good network of people around you, people who encourage you, people who support your dream. I wanted to bring my mother with me. She's 82, but she wouldn't fly. She's not flying since the pandemic. And so she says, no, I'm gonna pass on it, but I really wanted her to come and hear the story from a different perspective. She lived it, but she hadn't heard this. And so having, people around that you can talk to and who support you are incredibly important when you're on this kind of journey.
All right, Miss Stephanie Hickman, one more round of applause. Okay, so your mom will be able to watch the recording. We will all be able to watch the recording. We will get that out. We'll post it on the Swartz Center website under the Family Business Initiative. So you have just attended the second in our Family Business Leadership talk series for this academic year. The third is on March 22nd. It is features Emily Sheets, who will talk about innovation and technology strategy at Sheets, your favorite convenience store. So we look forward to having you back for that talk. And now please help yourselves to some snacks outside. And it sounds like we have a lot of family businesses in the room, so some stories to share with each other, I'm sure. Have a wonderful night.